Mr. Secretary, thank you for the time. It's great to be here at the Economic Club of New York, and a pleasure to ask you some questions. You know, Bob had the bio intro, your home in Charleston, South Carolina, your time in finance and business. But as we approach the 250th for America here, the celebration of the Declaration of Independence, your family has a rich history that goes even beyond that.
We did. We just had our 350th anniversary of the state of South Carolina a couple of years ago, and my family arrived very early. And one of the things that motivated me to come out from behind my desk was our family had been very prosperous for 300 years. My dad made some financial mistakes, and I went from living in the biggest house in town to bussing tables when I was 9 years old. And I am determined that is not going to happen to the United States of America on the eve of our 250th anniversary.
I want to talk about the economic mission, how you see the administration, the policies, but I want to talk first about the breaking news, and that is everybody's focused on this Iran deal, whether it's coming together, whether negotiations are working or not. As this is starting, this 60-day process, you've relieved the sanctions to enable Iran to sell oil. Critics of this deal would say you've lifted the maximum pressure before they've actually produced anything. How do you respond to that?
Sure, and Brett, what I would urge you, everyone in this room, to think about is the misinformation that we see as a result, I think, of three or four things. One, the Iranians are masters at propaganda. Two, the Iranian negotiating team, if we think about the three sleeves of the Iranian government, the, in quotation marks, elected officials, the IRGC, and the clerics, the negotiating team is from the government, and they are playing to a hardline audience back in Tehran. So, just like we have hardliners in our system, they have hardliners. Another is that nothing President Trump can do ever satisfies the media. I would tell everyone, sit back, let this process take place. It is going to be a process. What we have done, we have told the Iranians that we would like a big deal. The Iranians have never, but because of, I outlined it in my speech here last year, when I said that I would, if I held the Iranian currency, I would get out because the currency is going to collapse. Lo and behold, by December, the largest bank in Iran collapsed because of our sanctions. Central bank had to print money, and they had massive inflation. So we managed to, a year of maximum pressure. Then there was epic fury. We had economic fury where we took the sanctions up another level, and then we had the blockade. We have allowed them to, we've unsanctioned their oil, and the Iranians were always selling their oil. They were always selling it to the Chinese, and at a discount. And what I would say is, it is better for the world and worse for them if they are getting let's say it's the Brent rate, $75, $76 today, the full rate, rather than where we were a few weeks ago at $115 and getting 80% of that. So, and again, this is a very conditional, performance-based negotiation, and we are offering them carrots, and then there are sticks.
Well, to that point, I mean, have they performed up to this point to get that relief on this sanction?
Again, there is nothing there that we have done this sanctions relief, and this is a general benefit to the global markets, and it's not automatic tit for tat. This is going to be an arc of a negotiation, and we have done this, and the fact that they are at the table discussing their nuclear program has never been done before. That they are willing to discuss it we have not seen.
So your message is look at what they do, not what comes out in X and social media from the IRGC and others.
Yeah, just like the IRGC or someone came out the other day and said, oh, the Strait of Hormuz is closed again, and 30 ships went through that day. Look, it's one of those that for people in the markets, the narrative is one thing and the market's doing the other.
There's a lot been written, said, books about President Trump. You see him almost every day. What is his management style, and how do you describe it?
First of all, it's nonstop. That, as many of you have heard me say, is probably over the past 15 or 16 months, one of my most frequent refrains have been, no, sir, you didn't wake me. I'm always awake at 1:51 on a Tuesday night. And look, President Trump is high impact, high return, high performance, and he is juggling a myriad of things, and he has a viewpoint, and he pushes it, and he is very good at pushing and then knowing when to pull back. I think he's put together a great team in terms of the cabinet, the White House staff, and he really sweats us in terms of what he expects.
And what's your management style? Treasury secretaries operate differently. What's yours?
I've been very fortunate to walk into a great building that everyone had told me, oh, at Treasury, it's not like a typical DC department. It's this, but the career staff is great. We have great politicals. People come in. You probably are not fighting the establishment if you're at Treasury. That you want to either domestic finance, terrorism finance, international finance make a difference. And my style is to find very smart people and give them lots of room, and to have a very iterative process that at the end of the day, we only have 4 years. And what I've tried to do, as I outlined in my speech here, as I outlined a year ago, we want to do substantial financial deregulation, and we have. Not my numbers, but some outside consulting firms think that we've created $3 trillion of extra lending capacity in the regulated banking system. So my style is to have some very long-term objectives, which I think we're meeting. One was the maximum economic fury on Iran to deregulate the banking system, get the one big beautiful bill done, but try to, it was the same thing I did in my private career, try to stick to the prize, and the prize may not be immediate, and not you as much, but the Washington news cycle is built within an hourly cycle, a daily cycle, a weekly cycle, and we try to ignore the cycle.
Well, I fall in there too, I'm sure. But today the president was in Pennsylvania, the swingiest of swing states, in a district that is a swing district. He was talking about the economy at a Mack truck plant, talking about the big, beautiful bill. Yet when you ask people in any state, polls across the board say they see the economy underwater, that the numbers are not good as far as approval on the economy for the president. Why is that? And do you think it's going to turn around, and when?
Well, I think one thing we're not going to do is what the previous administration did, was tell people they don't know what they're feeling, because this idea, this narrative that maybe some journalists who are covering this tonight, who should be ashamed, said, oh, it's a vibe session. The American people don't know how good they have it. Well, the American people got torched. There's 21.5% inflation, that probably the worst in 50 years, and big drop in real wages. I know Jason Trinner's here tonight. He has an index that measured how working families, bundle of goods and services, in terms of groceries, rent, insurance, car payments, their inflation was probably 35%. So look, people are still hurt from that. We had a price level change, which is very difficult to bring down. But what I can tell you is what I had very good luck in my private business was looking at what's the sentiment versus what are people doing. And right now we're still seeing consumers spend. We're seeing no backup in credit card delinquencies. So we are working every day to try to bring the inflation back to target. More importantly, get up real wage growth. In President Trump's first term, real wage growth for hourly workers did better than management. The bottom 50% of economic households did better than the top 10. And what we've seen this time too from the One Big Beautiful Bill, also known as the Working Families Tax Cut, was that it was a home run for working Americans because I am also in charge of the IRS. And 44% of the returns we got this year took advantage of at least one of the no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, reduced taxes. Only 15% of our seniors paid taxes on their Social Security, and deductibility of auto interest for American cars. So we are pushing that, and I think that now that we are, I believe, on the other side of this conflict, gas prices will come back down, inflation will come back to target, and the real wage gains. We had seen real wage gains in every month of President Trump's presidency until April.
You've heard the pundits say the reason we're in this negotiating deal is because we want to get the administration wants to get oil prices down in time before the midterms.
They're absolutely not in the briefings with President Trump. Because Brett, again, not you, others want to have it both ways. Said, well, President Trump doesn't care about the inflation, doesn't care about the American people, but he wants to get oil prices or gasoline prices down by the election. You can't have both, right?
If you were to characterize the overall mission economically of this administration in an elevator pitch, what is it? We listened to the speech, but what would you say?
Well, a couple of things. One is to restore sovereignty. I've been quoted many times as saying the only good thing about COVID was it was a beta test for what could happen if we were to get into a hot war with another major nation. So we are bringing back critical industries. We are deregulating and letting the economy go, and we are pushing innovation and economic freedom.
Behind the scenes, there have been reports that you get a little fiery. There's a new book out that suggests there was another incident. There was something with Bill Pulte. What's the behind the scenes with Scott Bessent and other members of the administration?
Look, I think I've been described as having a long fuse, but when the powder keg blows, you don't want to be near it. And look, I think it's important to make one's opinion known, but as I've said too, it's not unlike a sports team where you can have disagreements in the locker room, but when you get on the field, you want to do your best. And I think we're all pulling together very well.
What's something that we're not covering a lot of that you're proud of as far as your job up until now?
Look, I think that what we've seen in terms of the banking system, I am a big proponent of small and community banks. I've met with hundreds of those bankers in the past year. I think that I am proud to say that I am an economic historian, not an economist. And having studied the patterns of financial traumas like we had in the 07, 08, 09, there's always an overreaction. And it's human nature. And we overreacted, and the financial straitjacket for our regulated institutions became much too tight. And you can see that. Like, private credit is a regulatory arbitrage. And I think what will go probably unnoticed in the history books is through the financial deregulation that we are bringing lending back into the regulated financial system where we can oversee it, where if there is, everyone was asking me about private credit and a downturn, and I think private credit is a great new innovation in terms of our U.S. financial markets. I do think it was a regulatory arbitrage, but what always worried me about private credit was that you wouldn't be able to use private credit in a downturn to restart the economy, whereas if we had a downturn, the Fed chair and I would be able to use the regulated financial system through window guidance on supervision, through opening windows, through facilities to restart the economy. So I think it will be reinvigorating, or one thing that has gone unnoticed is reinvigorating from the GSIBs to community banks the regulated financial system.
Two more quick things. You mentioned the Fed chair. There is a new Fed chair, Kevin Warsh. Rates stayed the same this past time. The president has been very vocal that he'd like to see interest rates come down. In this environment, where things stand now, do you think that there is increasing pressure on Fed Chair Warsh to drop rates, even though it might not be possible?
I am confident that the Fed chair will optimize the path for both inflation and economic growth. And the president said that at the Chair Warsh's swearing in that he would be independent, that he should do what he wants. And look, the president understands, he and I have talked about it quite a bit, that howitzers have taken out more governments, or excuse me, the bond market has taken out more governments than howitzers. So I believe that he has complete confidence in the Fed chair to do the right thing.
Last thing, the Trump accounts. This is something that I don't think a lot of folks fully have appreciated or taken advantage of. Is that fair?
I think both. I think the president's going to have a long-lasting legacy, but I think we will look back in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, some of us will be here in 50 years, for the 300th, that we will look back and think that this is the most important benefit for young people since the GI Bill. That our family have been big advocates for financial literacy. 38% of American households have no exposure to our great equity markets. They do not participate in the innovation. They do not participate in the American capital markets. And this, I believe, is a substantial and necessary step toward changing that. So it is, parents can open the accounts for children from newborns to age 18. Children born during President Trump's term will receive an initial $1,000 seed investment that will be put into a low-cost index fund. They will go live July 4th, which is Saturday, so it'll be July 6th. But for children not born during this administration, parents can add up to $5,000 a year, employers can add $5,000, but foundations, states are going to add. Some great philanthropists, Michael and Susan Dell, have contributed $6.25 billion. When Michael announced it, the president said, Michael, $250 million is a lot, 6.25 is really a lot. And they have done a bespoke program where their money will go to families that are who are not in the top 20% income zip codes. And that is going to work out to about $250 per child. Ray Dalio from Bridgewater has adopted Connecticut. Brad Gerstner adopted his home state of Indiana. Harold Hamm has done Oklahoma. So there's going to be a lot added to this. But I think, more importantly, it is going to be a real-time experiment in financial literacy. That many of these families that have never thought about the stock market, looked at things like this. It's going to be on the phone every day. It's going to become a topic at the dinner table, like I'm sure no one in this room brings their work home. But I do think that this has the potential to change the course of these young people, but also to change the discourse on its primary day here in New York. And because of the Hatch Act, I'm not allowed to comment on which candidates I'm pulling for. But I would think that with programs like this, that the socialist alternative would be less appealing.
But they have to sign up in order to take advantage.
But they've got to sign up. We've got about 6 million sign-ups so far, but that's only about 10% or less.
I'm going to hand it to Bob for the dais questions, but finally, what keeps you up at night?
The president. Look, the 4 years seems like a long time, and some days it seems like a long time. But really, we've only got 4 years. There's so much to do, whether it's in regulation, deregulation, competition, reshoring, manufacturing. And I have 2 children, leaving the country in much better shape. And I think that the 250th anniversary, I remember the bicentennial. I was 12. And I think that this is a great time to reflect. But I lie awake at night thinking of all the things that we need to do during our 4 years, and hope that whether it's a Republican or a Democratic administration, that many of these good policies can be carried on.
Mr. Secretary, thanks for the time. I'll hand it to Bob.
Secretary Bessent spoke to us in formal remarks and then dealt with questions from Mr. Baer, and now we're going to have questions from the dais. We have 4 able questioners today, all of whom are trustees of the Economic Club of New York. We're going to have Dambisa Moya, chair-elect of your club, co-principal of Versaka Investments, Arvind Krishna, vice chair of our club and chair and president and CEO of IBM. We're going to have Devin Parekh, managing partner of Insight Venture Partners, and Charles Phillips, co-founder of Recognize. So that's the run of show. Dambisa, over to you for the first question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Honorary Secretary of the Treasury. This year marks the 250th anniversary of the United States, but it is also the 250th anniversary of the publication of Adam Smith's seminal tome, The Wealth of Nations. How do you think Adam Smith's insights should influence economic policy today?
I think that if Adam Smith were to look at the United States of America, he would be astounded. And it would have proven how prescient he was in terms of the free spirit and ability for the people given the opportunity to conduct commerce in a unregulated way, and the things that could be created. I think in a way the United States would be almost unimaginable to him how prescient he had been. And I would also point out that he wanted free peoples, but he did often talk about the Navigation Act, which said that not all things are completely free, especially in the matters of defense, and I think he would actually admire what this administration is doing in terms of reclaiming our sovereignty.
Great. Thank you very much. Arvind, over to you.
Thank you. Secretary Bessent, first, thank you for your comments. One of the topics you mentioned was artificial intelligence, or AI. There's a lot of excitement on the topic, a little bit of trepidation in some corners. Would you comment on your views on the economic growth that AI could bring us and your views on regulating AI?
Well, I think we're already seeing the economic growth that it could bring us. I think a lot of people in this room would know that every $300 billion is 1% of GDP. And we are seeing that the hyperscalers are going to spend at least $750 billion this year. Obviously, a lot of that's import, so it won't go directly into GDP. But we are seeing the here and now, whether it's in the construction jobs, in the capital markets, the things that are happening. And I think that we all just have to have an open mind in terms of where this can take us. But I remember the boom, whether it was the internet boom or the office modernization technology boom in the 90s. It added about, for those of you who I'm sure, like I did, read Alan Greenspan's obituaries over the past few days, he was correct that technological boom roughly doubled productivity from 1.5 to 3. Could we do at least that? Can we do maybe more? And in terms of the regulation, it is something that I think about every day at Treasury because of AI, the financial system, and our responsibility of guiding the American economy. We think about the implications, and we are trying to optimize a very difficult calculus in terms of innovation and safety to get the proper equilibrium to make sure that we can maintain our lead. Because I will tell you, President Trump asked me to give some remarks in Evian, France last week to the G7 leaders about AI, and many of them had talked about AI risk, the risk to safety, the risk to employment, and I think they were slightly stunned when I said the biggest risk to AI is China getting ahead of us. I am one of the point people on our AI policy. I am the point person in terms of the economic relationship with China, and I can tell you that the reason the Chinese are willing to have a discussion on AI is because we are ahead. So we have to stay ahead.
Thank you. Devin, over to you.
Thank you, Secretary Bessent, for your comments. There seems to be a tension between the desire for a weaker dollar to support manufacturing on one hand and the need for dollar strength to maintain reserve currency status and fund the deficit cheaply. How do you think about managing that contradiction?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a contradiction because I remember when Germany was an industrial powerhouse, they did it with a strong currency. And the strong Deutschmark constantly made them become more efficient, made them innovate, made them up their production game. And if I think, I'm not sure where we are now, I might say it's 6.7% change in the dollar since last year, but I'm not looking at it. And I don't think I don't wake up and think, great, it helped the economy. I just think that it's a price on the screen and that what we are really looking for, when people talk about a strong dollar, I don't think it is the Bloomberg Dollar Index. I think that it means that we are doing the things that give us the underpinnings that people want to come to this country, whether it is tax certainty, regulatory certainty, energy certainty. And I don't necessarily believe that there is a duality there in a strong dollar and a manufacturing economy. I think that we can pull away in the manufacturing economy. Now, on the other side, that I do think, especially in a lot of low-cost manufacturing, that you can see a suppressed currency work against us. So, I often think it's not necessarily a strong dollar. It may be, I'll pick on Southeast Asia because they manage their currencies the most. It may just be a weak currency elsewhere.
Perfect, thank you. And the last question, please. Charles, over to you.
Thanks. Mr. Secretary, thanks for being here at this Economic Club event. My question has to do with housing. Annual home sales in the U.S. reached about 6 million in 2021, and now we're kind of stuck at 4 million a year. there seems to be a lot of rate lock-in that people just can't sell their homes because they have a low mortgage rate, and if they sell it, they get a higher one. So is housing affordability fundamentally a rate problem that you can influence, or is it a supply problem that you can't? And if rates do fall, doesn't that just pin up demand, reinflate prices anyway? And then lastly, I think the Senate just passed a bill yesterday addressing some of this. The House is considering it right now. Is there anything there, any unlock there that you need to talk about? It'd be helpful to get your view.
Good. Well, Charles, first of all, I want to thank you for not asking me a technology question that I couldn't answer. Look, this housing, to quote the maestro, is a conundrum. And it's this equilibrium that we haven't really seen it before, and a lot of it has to do with the rate locks that we saw during the very low interest rate environment, whether it was in the teens or especially in COVID, because as rates have gone up, house prices have stayed flat to slightly appreciated. We need it will help when rates come down. Before the Iran conflict, mortgages briefly went below 6%, and we saw an uptick in mortgage applications. It seems that there's something magic and psychological about that number, but you're right. We have to have a supply solution. At the federal level, we have no ability to regulate that. We do have the ability to give guidance, to push localities, states. I think something that will be important is changing the nature of prefab housing, manufactured housing. The technology in housing, some of it goes back to, and a lot of the regulations go back to the Chicago fire. There have been no advances in housing technology in 50 or 100 years, and we are hoping to be able to put out an all-of-government approach to try to standardize not zoning standards by municipality, but building standards. Where I live, Chevy Chase has different building standards than Bethesda, than McLean, than Silver Springs. So there's the economies there to the extent things can come out of the factory more standardized. And then with the housing bill, I do think that taking institutional buyers out, a lot of what we hear is, well, they weren't that big, but everyone in this room knows that markets are made on the margin. So a 3% non-economic buyer could be very different in boom markets like Atlanta, South Carolina, Alabama, Texas. Some of the larger aggregators might be buying up to 15 or 20% of the markets. And for those of you who are free market purists, it is not a free market because there is a tax arbitrage between investors buying housing who can depreciate the buildings and a residential buyer. So it is a tough problem, and it is going to take lower rates and more supply.
Great. First of all, Devin, Arvin, Dambisa, Charles, thank you for your questions. And let's just take a second and think what a wonderful job the Secretary has done this evening, delivering us remarks.